I'm on a mission to help every single one of us level up the way that we communicate, because we all deserve healthier, happier relationships, whether that's with ourselves, at work, or in our personal life. What do we actually need to communicate in a really healthy, effective way? So although we spend so much time on the words that we speak, it actually only accounts for 7% of our message.
Hey guys, and welcome back to another exciting episode of Catch-Ups in My Kitchen with me, Georgia Simmons, host of the podcast. In my kitchen this week, I am joined by Amira, also known on Instagram as the communication expert, to talk all things communication. How do we communicate effectively? How do we become the best communicators? And with that is also, how are we good listeners? They go hand in hand. And also, communication is key, and you can't take back the words that you say. So in this episode, we are going to learn about how to communicate. There are different communication styles. I did a quiz before this episode to work out what I am. I also made Amira try and guess what I am, and we had the conversation at the end. So a bit of context, I am an owl, but I'm also a dove. This will make so much more sense when you listen to the episode, so keep listening in order to find out what that all means. You'll be able to work out what communicator you are. You do slightly change in different contexts, but your communication style remains the same. This episode is amazing to work out how to communicate, what communication means, how to set boundaries, how to communicate effectively with friends, colleagues, your partner, in a relationship. We touched on everything. It was amazing. Amira is fantastic. You're in for a real treat. As always, please keep supporting this podcast. It means the world to me. We are growing week on week, and that's just so exciting. We're doing more community events. I love seeing you all in person. So yeah, lots of exciting things are coming. So without further ado, let's welcome Amira in the kitchen. Amira, welcome to my kitchen. How are you?
I'm literally so excited to be here. This is such a cool setup.
Thank you. I'm so excited to have you. This conversation is going to be juicy and fun, and I just can't wait. Do you mind giving a really quick elevator pitch? Who you are, what you do?
Of course. I'm Amira, also known as communication expert. I say I'm on a mission to help every single one of us level up the way that we communicate, because we all deserve healthier, happier relationships, whether that's with ourselves, at work, or in our personal life. And I always feel it's the lesson that we missed at school.
Yeah, so true. It's so true. And also, like, you can't take back words.
Yeah.
So it's important. So I'm really excited to go into all of this, but we have a quick fire round about all things food to kick things off. So, cook in or eat out?
Okay, I've listened to some of your episodes. Am I supposed to just go quick fire on this, or can I expand?
If you want to expand, you can expand.
Okay, thanks. I listened to other guests and I was like, I need to expand.
Yeah, go for it. I like detail.
Okay, I will cook in if I'm hosting.
Okay.
If I have to cook every day, it's a hell no from me.
Okay.
However, I have food prep. So thank you, Thrive, for keeping me going.
Nice.
But I love cooking when I'm hosting, because for me, it's like the energy and the hospitality. But if we've done a long week, I'm ordering in.
Fine. Okay. There's different reasons for different... I get it. I get it. Favourite restaurant in London?
Okay, I find this so hard because I actually eat out a lot. It's like my love language.
It could be top three. Would you like a recommendation on here?
Okay, definitely duck and waffle, which I feel is bait, but it's one of my favourites. Old school restaurant. It's open 24 hours. And I love that. You can go and get duck and waffle at 2 a.m.
Yeah, that's cool, actually.
There's not that many places in London, so I love that. I heard someone else on your podcast say Randall and Aubin, and I was like, I cannot believe he shared that restaurant. It's one of my favourites. I love seafood. Honestly, if you haven't been, I'm like, have to go.
Okay.
My third one, I think I might have to leave it at 2. I know I've got like, I actually really love like a quick, easy, but it feels really vibey, is Alto at the top of Selfridges.
Oh, yes.
I just love it. And the food's really good. I actually was there last week. And I love it because they change the theme every season.
That's cool. I've only been in summer. So I was about to be like, yeah, I love it in the summer, but that's the only time I've been. So that's a good one.
Yeah. Okay. And they change the menu as well.
Good. We like that as well. Otherwise it could get a bit samey.
Yeah.
Okay, go-to Deliveroo.
Okay, I know I said that I do eat out, but I tend to like go to a restaurant. I actually don't have Deliveroo on my phone.
I think that's good. Like, I don't like Deliveroo.
Okay, fine.
Yeah, it doesn't work for me.
Okay, fine. I'm going to be a little bit niche. Well, yeah, we do Nando's on a Monday night. Well, that's not niche. Like, after track. Good running session. Nando's. That's a bit of a ritual in our house. But we actually have this beautiful Thai place, like, 2 doors down from us. And you feel like you're in their kitchen.
Oh, I love that.
So if we do eat out, or if we're going to order in, that's what we order in.
That's really great. Also, a good Thai delivered. You can't recreate a really good Thai at home. I just don't think you can.
I agree. And their chicken gyozas, out of this world.
Okay, good recommendation. Go-to cuisine.
Oh my, I love food. Like, I love food. My go-to, this is the longest quickfire round, I apologise. My go-to cuisine, I think it would be Italian. I love a pasta.
Yeah, I agree. Italian is insane. It's so good. Go-to fridge or cupboard staple, which isn't the basics. What am I finding in your fridge or cupboard that's always there?
100% stem ginger. You know, like the ginger that goes like...
This is the nichest ever. I love it.
So I can only find it in Waitrose. I can't find it in any other supermarket.
Yeah.
And the Waitrose near me actually shut down. So I now have to go drive to go get it. Wow. But it is always in my cupboard. And it's because I make an absolutely incredible sticky ginger homemade cake.
Oh, amazing. Love that. Okay, and your favourite dish to cook at home?
This one's like so easy. I am known for my Caribbean curry. I either do it 3 ways. Traditionally with monkfish. I am a monkfish, like I'm seafood, fish, love it. So monkfish Caribbean curry. Sometimes if I've done like a roast lamb and hosted everyone and we've got leftovers, I'll do the curry with the lamb instead. And then if I need to just be quick, we'll put chicken.
Okay.
But that is like my go-to signature. Beautiful mango chutney in there.
Ooh.
Let it marinate overnight.
Ooh.
Yeah, there's a whole process for it.
She's a foodie and we love it. We love it. Okay, I want to start because I think this is a really good place to start, and I think a lot of people will be interested in this, about the different communication styles. What they are, what they mean. I did the quiz and I'm really intrigued at what you think I am at the end. We can like have a little disclosure. But yeah, let's go through the different communication styles and what they are.
Definitely. I think you're so right. It's such a beautiful place to start. And I think what I usually say to people is look at your whole entire life. There are going to be relationships where you're really good at communicating. And then there's going to be relationships in your life where you feel they either leave you uneasy, you feel like you're going to come unstuck. Your first and foremost point where you want to start is your communication styles. So biggest thing I want to say is we are all different and we all have a different preference of how we want to communicate. So I'm going to go through the 4 styles. The biggest thing as well is, yes, once you know what your style is, the most important thing is what is the other person's style, because that's where you need to start to learn to adapt. So let's go through 4 styles. I made this as a fun quiz because like communication can get a bad rap. It can sound old, traditional, boring. Who wants to learn effective communication?
This episode is sponsored by Zuki. If, like me, you're interested in supplements and love to feel your best, then you need to try Zuki's range of liposomal supplements. They have been clinically proven to provide 4 times the amount of absorption compared to conventional supplements, which means you feel the benefits faster. They also come in a delicious single-serve sachet, which means you can look forward to taking your supplements every day. My current favourite is vitamin B12, which tastes just like strawberry. If you're interested in trying Zuki, they have given all catch-up listeners a chance to receive a free taster pack. This includes vitamin C, D, B12, collagen, and turmeric. To receive your free pack, click the link in the show notes. Thank you so much, Zuki, for sponsoring the podcast. Now let's get back to the episode.
So let's make it a little bit fun. So when you take the quiz, there's 4 animals or 4 birds you can come out as. An owl, an eagle, a dove, or a peacock. Okay, so eagle, let's go there first. That's like my go-to. That's my dominant style. If you like to communicate as an eagle, you are pretty direct, you're quite succinct, you're to the point, and you're really motivated by a goal and a solution. So you might, for example, talk quite quickly. You will definitely want to like cut to it and get straight to the point. Now, I think as well, when I say direct, people take that as a real negative and a bad thing, but it isn't. It just means you're quite succinct and to the point. And that's because you will just want to find a solution. And I think the big thing with the communication styles is try not to add personality traits on them, because people will say, okay, so they can be like, I'll go through doves in a second, but they'll be like, oh, so they're the people pleasers. And I'm like, that's a behavior trait. So just try and keep it separate, because what you'll end up doing is stereotyping. And that's what I don't want you to do.
Okay.
So that's our eagles. There's pros and cons for every style. So what do we love about our eagles? Well, you're going to know where you stand. You're not really going to be sitting in blurred lines. But sometimes if they are under pressure and quite succinct and to the point, you might feel that they've forgotten other things in the process. And maybe they've cut a corner, or they haven't thought about how you feel, or adjusted their tone. But for them, they're just getting straight to the point.
Okay.
That's our eagles. I always do ours next, because that's my husband. And we have different communication styles.
I love this. Yeah, great.
So I always say my owls are my types of communicators who are quite reflective and thoughtful. So usually you won't find them responding straight away. That doesn't mean they're not listening. That doesn't mean they didn't take it in. But usually they need some time to take it in, reflect, and then think about how they feel. So like, I appreciate them for being considered, well thought through. I would also lean on them for things being correct, because they've had that headspace and that time. So when they speak, they tend to speak with like weight behind it. Downsides can come across a little slow sometimes. Like, can we just get the conversation resolved? So again, pros and cons to everything. My doves, so I think they get a bad rap for being people pleasers. But again, you can be a people pleaser regardless of what your communication style is. My doves really focus on people. So when they're communicating, they're thinking about, how do you feel? Like, are you okay? They really want to nurture relationships. So that's going to be like a priority for them above everything else. Put that into a work situation. I always say they're the people that we want to rely on in our team. They keep us together. They are the ones that not just tend to be fun, but are the glue to make sure we're all okay, we're being cohesive, and they care. They really, really care. And again, it doesn't mean that an eagle or an owl doesn't, but how they care will look different. However, for our doves, sometimes they're so focused on other people that they will miss getting things done.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Right, especially in a work context. If we take that into everyday life, sometimes for my doves, you're so focused on what other people need, you forgot that you have needs. You forgot that you have boundaries. And again, that doesn't mean that eagles and owls have their boundaries absolutely locked down and really good, but my doves are so focused on other people.
Yeah.
Sometimes we need to bring that attention back to you. What do you also need? And then last but not least, my peacocks. I always think this like describes exactly as they are. They are my beautiful, expressive thinkers. I always say they're the people in the room that get you excited. They have a vision. Like you buy into that idea. They can be quite charismatic. And the reason I use that as a bit of a description, because eagles will be quite to the point. Like, it's succinct. They're not going to add more words into their sentences if they don't need it. Your expressive people are going to be excited, and they're probably going to be able to, especially in a work situation, get you to buy into that idea. They also are going to get bored if they're communicating with somebody that's going into too much detail. They don't care how, just let them do their big idea. So they do tend to be like really enthusiastic, super passionate. And again, it doesn't mean that the other styles aren't, but it will look really different for each style.
Okay.
So that's my whistle stop tour without too much information.
It's so interesting. So I know what I came out as, but listening to that, what if you can see yourself in multiple areas of all of those?
Beautiful. So, and I was thinking about this when you wanted me to guess your style, because there's a few caveats to it, and this is really important. I would say, for example, I'm a blend between an eagle and a peacock, for sure. couple things here. When you take the quiz, it's going to give you your most dominant. That's the
Right.
first thing, right? I would say lots of people can relate to 2. So
Yeah.
if you feel like you're a blend, most definitely you probably are.
Okay.
Now, the fact you said, I can see myself in all of them. I don't disagree with you, but I'm going to also challenge it. Sometimes I do get people who will be very, very level on all 4 styles. Rare, but definitely possible. Now, the difference is because I would say as well, if you're quite self-aware and you've learned to adapt over your lifetime, of course, you're going to be able to relate to all 4 styles. So can I communicate as an owl? Yeah, there's certain things that I'm communicating with my team. I go into so much detail. Do I like to do it? No. Will I do it? Yes. So I think the biggest thing to remember is like, what's natural to you? Because you've naturally, especially as well, if you've been in your career for 5 years or 10 years or in a work environment, you would have naturally adapted. So think about actually, how do you like to receive information?
Okay, interesting.
That's the most important thing. So definitely, are you more than one? Probably. And even when I was thinking about you, because I was like, I've not spent enough time with you.
Yeah,
So,
it's hard to tell.
yeah, and with my clients, normally like I'll guess straight away, but I'm working with them really deeply. And the difference is because you might be giving me your adapted communication style versus what's actually your preference.
Yeah, because I know personally, I am really self-aware and I am a huge adapter.
Yeah.
And I like read a room and like I'm always like to my brother, why would you say that? Did you not read the room?
Yes.
And I'm like, God, I really feel things and change accordingly.
Yes.
So I was like, oh God, I can see myself in so many of these areas. But what if your style, so this is kind of separate but different, your style may change in different situations. So the way you communicate with your colleagues is different to the way that you communicate with your family. And that's probably a huge part of communication.
Okay, probably my most asked question when we talk about communication. There's a few layers to this. And this is where I'm really going to talk about like your authenticity versus your adaptability. You gave a really good example when you were like, but Amira, I am really self-aware and I can read a room. Also, I'm going to say maybe sometimes too much. Okay. And I've got 2 that I think you are. So we'll see by the time we get to the end of the episode. There's one I'm definitely going to like associate you with. So you've definitely adapted for sure. And that's a good thing. That's not a bad thing. But my key thing around your style as well is understanding how can you leverage it in your authentic way so that you're still showing up as you, and where do you need to adapt? Because you are so right. If we don't adapt, we're not going to survive as humans. And most people will say to me, Amira, I communicate differently at home than I do at work. That's natural because your workplace for most of us is your professional setting. Not that my workplace isn't, but something that's really important for me is that my tone of voice and the way that I come across is the same no matter who I'm talking to or what space I'm in. And this kind of goes into something else. So it goes beyond communication styles. But I was running a workshop recently and somebody said to me, and they were talking about work, and they said, I code switch. So as soon as I get into my workspace, like I will adapt so much, the way that I speak, the way that I come across, my tone of voice, I do like a complete code switch, but this is not how I talk at home.
Wow.
And so if you, and I know this is really us going off, it's an important point. If you feel that you're doing that, I would say you've adapted too far. So you raising that question for me is really around making sure you don't lose your authenticity. I've had someone recently in another workshop take this to the absolute extreme. And there was a bit of tension in the team, a lot of tension. That was an understatement. And it's because they have really different communication styles, really, really different. And nobody was really willing to meet in the middle. And the other person, who was coming across quite aggressive, said, this is just who I am. And I was like, no. Okay, we took the authenticity too far.
Yeah.
And in that situation, you're not learning how to adapt. So do we need to adapt? For sure. Do I expect you to communicate differently with your family? Yeah, probably. But if you think about your communication style in terms of what bird you come out of, that's more around how you want to speak and also how you want to receive information. So if you're talking to me, Georgia, I want you to just be clear, direct, to the point. don't really beat about around the bush with me.
Yeah.
Like, I move pretty fast. But then also, I know when I'm communicating with my team, I'm really expressive. So I'm very much like a peacock with them, especially when I'm talking about the big vision. I don't really want my team to tell me how they're going to do it.
Yeah.
I'm just like, here you go, guys. I trust you. You're the experts. Go do it. Let me know when it's done.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Completely.
Okay.
Completely. And I was kind of like thinking about different people, and I was like, I think successful people are good communicators.
Yeah.
But I don't think the top successful people are good communicators. They're really, really good at communicating in one setting, but they cannot adapt. Like, I always think about like the top kind of like 1% earners in the world, let's say. They're probably so good at communicating with their team, and they probably haven't got a great family relationship. Like, I don't think they can communicate at home. I feel like if you looked into it, like they would bring that dominating, like delegating tone back, and it's like, this isn't going to work. So I was like, oh, this is really interesting, because I think that the most successful people in life, it depends on how you define success, but are great communicators, because I think that's like one of the values you need to be successful. But yeah, the top 1% who are actually successful in earning, or in a money sense, probably don't have very great relationships.
I think that's such a beautiful point that you brought to the table. And I definitely see it probably like with my one-to-one clients the most, especially if they probably like sit underneath that and they're dealing with those people. And also there's a lot of like toxicity that can happen at that level as well. And I don't want to give like leadership a bad name, because it's not fair to generalize, but I definitely think sometimes people have got to certain positions without having to adapt, and so they can't see the reason why they need to. And I think you raised such a beautiful point that they could be great communicators with their team, and exactly as you said, be clear to the point, explain the vision, get people's buy-in, bring people on that journey with them. But how well you adapt massively comes down to, let's use the word successful, but in your relationships. And if you can't adapt, you are really going to struggle in one area of your life, definitely. And also, I think taking me and my husband's a really, really good example, because we have such different communication styles. I know if he hears me working, he doesn't appreciate my communication style, because he'll view it as, you're being short, you're being abrupt. And I'm like, no, I'm just busy and I've got many things to do. But I know that like my tone has to adapt, which is another layer of the way that we communicate. So I always say, when you're thinking about the way you communicate, start with communication style. That's like your base point. That's you understand, how do I want to receive information? How do I tend to talk? And maybe this is why I'm miscommunicating with people. Then we have to start layering up. So where are you adapting? Where are you not adapting? Are you still being your authentic self? And then I feel like we're going to get there, but I've started talking about your tone of voice. So everything else that's not your words comes into play, and it's so important.
That was my next question. I was going to be like, we're talking about communication here, and people listening might be thinking verbal.
Yeah.
Which obviously is like the main way we communicate. But there are so many other ways we communicate other than just by speaking. So let's touch on those areas. So like probably the way we dress, the way we use our hands, the way we use our faces, our expressions, our mannerisms, our eyes, our everything. It kind of goes into the bigger picture of communication. So let's touch on these things, because I think this is like also the subconscious. You may be thinking so much about what words you're about to say, you forget all the other things. So yeah, let's touch on those.
Okay, adore. You're so right. It's all the things we don't talk about. And I also want to make this like super relevant and applicable to everybody that's listening and your day-to-day life. This is so important. So I'm going to touch on if you have an argument with somebody, because I think that will be super important. Let's go through some of the stats as well, because that's always helpful. Now, there's research that was done in the 70s, which I totally get is a long time ago now. Nobody, as far as I know, has actually done a more recent study. But if we go off that in terms of what do we actually need to communicate in a really healthy, effective way, you're so right, it has to be more than our words. Now, our words, you're right, we spend so much time thinking about our words. And I was running a workshop probably years ago when I was in corporate, and I was working with actors, and they gave such a beautiful example. And they said, we spend so long learning a script, like memorizing the words, same as like singers. right? You have to know the words, otherwise you're not going to be able to perform. However, they said if we just stood here and read it or memorized it, how engaged are you going to be? How much are you going to buy into who we are, the character that we are? So although we spend so much time on the words that we speak, it actually only accounts for 7% of our message. So the key, I think, sometimes people, or the misconception people go away with is, oh, so my words don't matter. And I'm like, no, that's not what the research is saying. What it's saying is that in order for your message to land in the way you want it to land, it can't just be your words. And actually what you don't realize is that it's all the other things, exactly as you said, the way you dress, your facial expression, your body language, the way you're sitting, the way you're standing. Did you fold your arms? Did you not? Did you raise your eyebrows when somebody said something? Did you squint your eyes? Did your tone of voice drop? Are you being monotone? Are you raising the volume of your voice? Are you speaking really quickly because you're nervous? Every element of that carries so much more weight. And in an ideal world, and I think this is important to talk about like post-COVID, because we're not all face-to-face. And sometimes that's beautiful because you get to connect with people all over the world. But I want to plant the seed of you just need to be a little bit more mindful then of how you communicate. In an ideal world, we're always going to be in this setting. Yeah. We're going to be face-to-face. I'm going to see you. I'm going to know that you're smiling at me and I can hear your tone of voice and I can see, oh, you're sitting comfortably. Okay, you're not nervous. Great, you're putting me at ease. But we don't always have that luxury in life. So I think it's important to remember, yes, in an ideal world, we need more than just our words for the message to land, for us to have a really healthy, engaging conversation. Is that always possible, whether it's work or home life? No. But then I like to think we have a hierarchy of like your mode of communication. So yes, face-to-face is not always possible. So what's like your next best option? Usually a video call, because at least you can still see like the top half of somebody. You can still see their face expressions. Sometimes that's not possible, especially in like a work situation. I always feel that we spend so much time on a computer and on calls that actually can be so emotionally draining. So there's a balance to everything that I'm saying. But then I say, all right, pick up the phone. You can still hear through somebody's tone of voice if they're smiling. You can still, there's less likelihood for that to be miscommunicated. So if I take this as a classic example, let's say you've had an argument with your partner or even one of your friends. And this actually came up with somebody really, really recently. And it was with their in-laws. And they read this message to me and they'd spent so long crafting this message. And it was on WhatsApp. I said, Amira, can I read it to you? I said, go for it. Be my guest. And it went on and on. Okay. And in their world, they had crafted it with so much thought. They addressed all the points. They showed empathy. They wanted to put their in-laws at peace and explain also that this is why they were upset. And they also wanted to put a boundary in place. So a lot was happening in this conversation. But the problem I had with it was that it was written down. And so we go back to your words. All you have in that written message is your words. And as soon as you send that message, it's now out of your control. So however that lands, that person is going to receive it depending on what mood they're in that day, their own preconceptions, their own limiting beliefs, their own maybe unhealthy communication habits that have stemmed from the way they've grown up. 80% of us don't like conflict, so you're going to shy away from that straight away. And it's often too much information for our brain to take in. So I always like to say that if you can avoid it, don't write things down. That doesn't mean ever. Like things like addresses or dates or things you need to refer back to, go for it. And usually I get challenged if I'm in like a company session, they'll be like, I need an audit trail. I'm like, okay, but that to me screams a lack of trust. So why do you need an audit trail? So I'm not saying never, because sometimes I think the point can get really blown out of proportion. But I am saying if it's not always possible face-to-face, can we opt for a phone call even? Or what about a voice note?
I was about to say the best thing that WhatsApp brought out is the voice note. I mean, the power of a voice note. I'm always like my mum is really funny like this. She'll like read a message and be like, oh, that was a bit rude. And I'm like, what was it though? And so I then grab her phone and I read it back in a different tone.
Nice.
And I'm like, how did that sound? And she was like, that's okay. I was like, but we don't actually know which way she sent it. So this is really confusing, isn't it? So it's really funny.
Beautiful.
And I'm like, voice note, mum, always.
Yeah.
And it's so much better because you can hear the tone and like in a situation, like it's just so much better to address something like, hi, how are you? Like already you're like happier, or like, hey, how are you? Like I've just said the same 3 words, but like it's so different.
Change the meaning straight away.
Completely. But what if people listening might be like, I've got no idea if I communicate well or if I don't. I've got no idea if my body language is good or if it's not. And I might be wrong here, so let me know if I am. But I think that this doesn't have to be through starting a business or being an entrepreneur, but if you put yourself out of your comfort zone, for example, you go to an event on your own, you start a business, you go on holiday on your own, I don't know, you're doing something solo or with a new group or something, that's when you work out how you communicate or where your flaws are communicating. And I often think that in big corporate companies, you might be just kind of swept along with the tide and told where to go, what to do, what to say, how to write it. It's so structured that you're kind of just like molded into how they want you to be and how they want you to communicate, that you might not even know your own style. But for me, I'm like, go to events all the time on my own. I've started my business. I have a podcast. I'm speaking to people all the time who I don't necessarily know very, very well. At the end of the episode, we know each other really well. But like, it's always, really interesting situations where I feel like you kind of get to know how you communicate and you really focus on things like eye contact, body language, tone of voice, speed of how you're speaking, all these certain things. Whereas maybe if you're not putting yourself in situations where they're maybe more uncomfortable, you won't know your communication style.
I think you raise a beautiful point. I'm gonna add something that maybe I think comes before it, because I think you're right. Getting uncomfortable, you will then, if you're turning up to an event on your own, you will know how you feel. Or you'll be like, oh God, my palms started sweating when somebody came up and just asked me my name. Oh God, I freaked out. All right, cool. Why am I feeling uncomfortable? Couldn't even get my words out, let alone think about my style, right? So you're right in terms of, if you're gonna put yourself into situations that are completely new for you, it is gonna be a really beautiful test and kind of hold up that mirror to you to say, hey, okay, we've got some work to do. And I really hear your point in terms of corporate companies, for example, and getting swept along with the tide. I was like, oh, you said that so beautifully. And that's definitely coming from somebody as well who, I spent 12 years in corporate and loved it, like learned so many lessons. I truly feel like it set me up for what I do now. And one of the reasons, not the reason, but one of the reasons I can work with such a diverse range of people. However, for me, definitely it was like losing my authenticity. Because you're so right, you mold, and sometimes you can mold so far that you've disconnected from yourself. What I would probably say is, before you even get to the point of challenging yourself and putting yourself out there, I would actually really say is ask for feedback. Because so many of us, and you also touched on the subconscious, so many of us claim to be self-aware. And I would say that my one-to-one clients who come to work with me will say to me, Amira, I'm self-aware. And I actually don't disagree with them. They are, but not to the level that I need them to be. And so we spend so much time deepening that. And the reason being is we've all got our subconscious, which I always say is where your communication blueprint sits. So how you handle conflict, whether you shy away from tension or friction, whether you sometimes come across as too passive or too aggressive, all of those habits that you've built have often come from the way you've grown up, what you've seen witnessed, even as well in like your early career. It won't all just be in your childhood. And so that awareness is really difficult for you to see your blind spots because they're yours. And often you need somebody else to show you them. So I totally agree. Go to the event and make yourself uncomfortable. I'm sure there are people listening being like, hell no, I'm not doing that. That makes me cringe. But then start asking people for feedback. And I know people hate that word, but it's like one of the core things I talk about. And start with people that you trust. Yeah. So don't feel like you need to go and ask somebody that you don't know that well, that maybe might give it to you in a really brutal way. But just start with people that are close to you and say, hey, how did you think I came across in that? Because often what I find with my clients as well is they have their whole internal dialogue, which majority of the time is pretty negative. And when they first come to me, they're like, I turned up at this event. Okay, how did it go? Amira couldn't get my words out. I couldn't give eye contact. And they will give me 10 million reasons why they came across so badly. Now, if I have the luxury of either knowing somebody else that was at that event, or I've managed to maybe like see it played back or something, their perception of themselves is not how it landed.
Yeah, so true.
It doesn't match. So yes, there's 2, maybe 3 layers to that. Okay, you're going to be self-aware to a certain extent. Every single one of us has blind spots. To this day, I have a supervisor and a mentor because I don't want my blind spots to ever harm my clients. Like, no matter how aware I am, I call myself the communication expert. Like, I live and breathe this. I still have blind spots. So that's like, get somebody else to see it. You can't see everything, so stop trying to think that you can. And then sometimes there's that disconnect between how you view yourself and how others view yourself.
The self-critic is going to like evaluate you negatively rather than, that's such a good point. In terms of the feedback, I always think about, when you go to someone's house and or you go into like your friend's room or something and you're like, oh my God, I love that picture. And they're like, which one? What? And like, when like you see things that they don't, or like, I don't know, you go to your parents' house, you're like, why have you still got the fan out? It's like winter. And they're like, didn't even see it. And like, you're so used to your own surroundings that you don't even see things. Like, even for example, in this room right now, I've got red candles in my candle holder from Valentine's Day in February. And I'm like, oh my God, hold on. If I walked in here, I'd be like, why are they red? And I've just forgotten that they're red because I'm so used to the surroundings. So it's probably like really similar that you pick up on things if you're looking at it from an external point of view rather than like an internal point of view. So that makes a lot of sense. You talk about conflict. Everyone goes through conflict every day, probably, to an extent. They might not be the best way, but what is like the best way or the good steps you should take if you need to address something in conflict?
Definitely. I'm probably going to give a little bit of theory here and then actually like a practical way for you to address it, okay? 1, we need to like redefine conflict. As soon as I say the word conflict, I am sure I switch half my people off because they're like, either I don't have conflict or I just don't want to talk about it. And I always say it's a healthy thing. Whether you're in a couple, whether you're dating somebody, whether it's at work, we are supposed to have friction. We're supposed to have tension. But we want to make sure that it's healthy conflict. And I think so many of us, especially in relationships, has grown up with the notion that like couples that get on don't argue. That's rubbish. Can we just bust that myth, please? Okay, you aren't supposed to agree and see eye to eye with every human being you touch, whether it's work and your team or whether it's at home with your family as well. Family is a huge one, okay, that I deal with my clients, their relationships with their family and that frustration. So my first thing is, can we redefine conflict? We need it. Otherwise, we're never going to change the status quo. And also, if you think about, without me getting like too deep here, zoom out on a world level and everything that is going on in the world, I always say that, and I guess it's a huge part of why I do the work I do, is we just need to learn how to have healthy conflict, because we're supposed to disagree, but we're also supposed to learn how to find a solution that hopefully works for the majority, not for everybody, right? So that's my first thing. My second thing is understand what, I'm going to use the word hooks you into conflict. What bothers you? And usually we will have a couple at least, okay? And then that's for you to do a little bit of work on. So I know, for example, one of mine, to this day, I just manage it really well now, is a lack of fairness. And sometimes as well, it's not even a lack of fairness to me. It's if I'm in a room and I'm witnessing it, it will trigger me into what I'm going to call my conflict state. So you need to be aware of what hooks you into that, because as soon as it hooks you, you're going to communicate really differently. You need to really, really just know that and be aware of that. That's the only thing you take out of this episode, that will be enough.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Right? And you said something so beautiful earlier. You said, actually, we're probably in conflict so much of our day, but we just don't realize it. And so we need to tune into it, because what's bothering us? Or it was really interesting, actually. My husband called me yesterday and it was in the middle of his work day, and he doesn't really do that. And I knew he was kind of going back to back. And he was like, something's just happened. I said, go on. He was like, it's left me a little bit uneasy. I just need to air it. I said, go for it. So what was really good there, and I've actually got quite a similar trait, as soon as I trip into overthinking or replaying a situation in my mind, I know I'm in my conflict state. I know that I'm not okay. That means, let's say you were on my team and you came to ask me for something, or you needed something, or you needed sign off, or you wanted me to get creative with you, but I'm already in my conflict state. You're probably going to get, if I'm not aware of how to communicate, a really shitty response from me.
Yeah.
Or something that's going to upset you or leave in a certain type of way, or feeling that I'm off, whatever it is, because we're all different. So I sometimes think I must sound so boring because I talk about awareness all the time. You can't change anything. You can't be a better communicator. You can't have better relationships if you're not aware. So like, get really honest. What bothers you? So lack of fairness is a really big one for me. Also, a lack of collaboration. So I really love people to be involved. I want to hear their ideas. And if someone's like shouting over somebody or dismissing somebody, I will have something to say. So definitely your hooks. That's my second thing. And then third thing, to answer your question when you said, Amira, how do you actually go about it? Tip, before I actually tell you what you can say, is try and nip it in the bud sooner rather than later. It doesn't have to be immediate. I love the phrase sleep on it, because sometimes that's exactly what you need. Okay. Yeah. If something's upset me today, it doesn't mean I need to come and address that with you straight away. Sometimes that will be helpful, sometimes that won't. And usually people say to me, Amira, give me a time frame. What's a good time frame? Like, there's not a science to it, but like I say, try and keep it within a week, especially if it's a work situation. But generally speaking, and you'll feel this as well, if you've been in a relationship, has your partner ever thrown the receipts at you? So they've been logging it, all the things that wound them up, or they got cross about, but they never said. And then you end up in this argument and they threw all the receipts at you. It's not helpful, it's not healthy, and it's really difficult to find a solution at that point. So you want to address it sooner rather than later. And I get that if you're not used to this is going to take practice, but just try to start small. So something you could say is, hey, I've got something on my mind, or I've been reviewing something. I want to share how I feel about this. Mm-hmm. So really, really important thing in conflict or any sort of tension and friction is, one, I say signpost the conversation. So think about a road sign when you're driving. That road sign tells you what's coming up. Do the same thing in your conversation. Hey, I've got something on my mind, want to run this past you, or want to share this with you, or I'm keen for us to find a different way of doing this. Depends who you're talking to, okay? Because that's quite worky, the way I phrase that, and probably not how you're going to speak to your partner or your family, right?
Yeah, but it makes so much sense. It's just kind of like teasing them up for it rather than just like dropping the bomb and being like, bang. Yes. And that's a bit much. This links so well to something that I saw yesterday. It was Shivani. You know Shivani's podcast, Millennial Mind? I
think I know what clip you're about to tell me. Go on.
And she talks about arguments and like having disagreements in conversation. And she was saying how it's not a negative, and people around her are like, oh my gosh, they're about to have a conflict. Like, I can feel tension. They're not agreeing. And actually, no, they were just learning from each other. And I was like, that is so true. Like, just because you've got a point doesn't mean that you're arguing or you don't agree with their point, but you should be able to share yours and they share theirs without it being a massive big argument and a disagreement. I also think that conflict means you care. If you don't care about someone, you're not going to bother with the conflict because you don't even care about the outcome. So you're like, what's the point in wasting my energy on trying to deal with this, because I actually don't really care about the person and I don't even care if this gets resolved. So conflict means they care. And I think if someone says to you, I want to run something by you, or something's not sitting easy or whatever, that's because they really care about your relationship with them and they want it to work, not because they don't. So I think that's really, really interesting.
I love it. I've seen the clip, so I was so happy you brought that in, because I think she started the clip and she said, it's taken me in my 30s to learn this. And so you're so right, because I also say this as well, if I'm like training a sales team and objections, like if your client or somebody has objections or they're asking questions or they're challenging, it means they're interested. So don't take it as a negative. So I love when you're saying, if someone's got some friction or tension or something they want to address with you, it's because they care. Otherwise, you're so right, they'd walk away.
Yeah.
And last year, one of my friends had like a really difficult conversation with me. I happened to be on the receiving end of it. And to be fair, I had no idea it was coming. She dealt with it in a really, really good way, and basically telling me how I hadn't really shown up. as a friend. So it was a really difficult conversation, and not one I definitely wanted to be on the receiving end of, right? But exactly as you said, it strengthened our relationship because I needed her to feel that she can be honest with me and tell me how she feels. And in that moment, I needed to just listen. I needed to receive it. It wasn't about whether I agreed with it or not. That's how she felt. And I think that's so important, like you said, to have those conversations because somebody cares. Now, the only other thing I guess I want to add on that is that there is a difference between doing that in a healthy way and doing it in an unhealthy way. So same thing as your communication style, you're going to have a fight language, and it very much links to like your stress response. So your fight or your flight or your fawn or your flop, right? And freeze for some of us. So really understand if conflict or friction or tension makes you uncomfortable. Couple of things here. One, think about how you've grown up. I was always a fighter. So, and there's many reasons for that, okay? So what I've had to spend a lot of time nurturing and like untraining my brain is that if somebody's giving me feedback, as an example, I don't need to be defensive. Okay, and yes, that taps into like your mindset and how you view it as a learning opportunity. But if you feel critiqued and you get your back up, there's a reason why that is your fight language. So exactly as you said, can we lean into conversations where the goal is not to agree, the goal is to learn? And if you've got a different perspective from me, great, I want to hear it.
Yeah.
But that takes curiosity. So start from that space. And then the second thing is look at your fight language, because most of us will have an unhealthy one. Mine happens to be fight. We've worked on it a long time. Sometimes it will still creep in. For other people, it's I freeze. Amira, I say nothing. And then I walk away and I wish I said this. That can be equally as destructive. So really know what's your unhealthy response and how can you work on that.
Yeah, such a good point. Such a good point. One thing you mentioned then is like listening. You're like, I just listened. So obviously with communicating, it's two ways. You got to speak and you got to listen. And they're both equally as important. And I think you mentioned like one of like the hooks that kind of like get your back up. Mine is listening. If I don't feel I'm being listened to, I am like, oh my God, it drives me insane. And I think your hooks are actually something that, not saying I've got past trauma, because I feel like the word trauma can seem really traumatic, and it's not. But for me, listening is like the most important. It really annoys me if someone's not listening. And I'm speaking to someone, we've all had it. We've been in a big room, we're in a room, we're talking to people, and they're looking at you, they're listening, but their eyes are over here or they're over here, and you know they're not listening to you, and it's the worst feeling. So for me, if someone's not listening, that's when I'm like, oh, this is annoying. Even like on a Zoom call, I can just say, like, I know they're not engaged. And like that really, really bothers me. So anyway, listening is just as important. Yeah. So how can you be a good listener?
Gorgeous question. I want to reply to a few things that you've said. I really hear when you said, I don't want to use the word trauma, because it makes it sound bigger. I just want to put it out there. To some extent, we all like carry some sort of trauma within us, and I do get it, because I think the misconception of trauma is that it can feel so heavy and something huge and really bad has happened to us. But sometimes we've just witnessed things as in adulthood, and I'll actually give an example of trauma in my life which you might not associate as being trauma. Actually, this has happened to me twice. I don't know why, but I've witnessed road accidents, both with motorbikes, and nothing to do with me.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And they really stick with me. And one was, maybe I was a teenager or like early 20s, and one was last year.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and last year was like, I had to really kind of work through it because it really stuck with me, and I can feel things in my body like usually before they're going to happen. So it gave me a really uneasy feeling. So I just thought that was helpful because you raised such a good point. And I know before I do what I do now, I really grew up with trauma as some sort of like abuse or hugely negative. And actually I think it's helpful because when you talked about actually linking that to, we all have this thing then around what bothers us and what hooks us in, and yours is not being heard, right?
Yeah.
And mine's not being seen. And I know and understand where and why that is, right?
Yeah.
So when you said actually listening is so important, I'm actually going to argue in a positive way that I actually think it is the key to being the best communicator. And I know that's ironic because I spend a lot of my time talking. But when I'm with my clients, I don't.
Yeah.
I listen. And I've got one of my clients who at the end of like every session was like, I'm so sorry I talked so much. And I was like, that's what I need you to do, because my job is to listen. So when you said, how do we actually become a better listener? One thing I want you to check in with yourself is, how do you currently listen? And again, you are so right that it might be different at work versus at home. So let's go through a couple of examples. Biggest one, you listen to respond. So I don't really care what you're going to say. I'm just waiting for you to finish because I need to get my point across. Classic, right?
Yeah.
And it's human nature, okay? And it's the way that our brain works. And a really important thing around listening is, how can you interrupt your brain and your neural pathways? I know it's a little bit like neuroscience-y, but you need to create a pause. You need to literally say nothing. But so many of us associate that with an awkward silence, or uncomfortable, or, God, I think I've got to say something because I need to validate them. It's really like, take your friend as an example, and your friends come to share something with you. A different way you might listen, which is a way I don't want you to do, but you're trying to relate to them. And so you share a story about when that happened to you. Well, that's not listening.
No, you're just talking at them again.
Yeah, you made it about you.
Yeah.
And the intention might be good, but I'm pretty sure that in that moment, your friend just needs you to listen. And really good example is like when my husband called me yesterday, I didn't give him advice. I didn't say to him, well, have you thought about this? Or maybe this is why the person did it. I just listened to him. And by the end of the conversation, he worked out what he wanted to do. He didn't need me. He just needed space and for somebody to listen. And I think that we don't know how to do that well for many, many reasons. And sometimes I think, especially like in a work environment, and I'm going to just throw out the female piece here because I think that is important. We think that like, if we're not talking, then it's like we don't have anything of value to say. And so there is like that deep inner work, which I know I do with my clients and I sit in that space, but making peace with knowing when you want to speak and when you want to listen. But actually, in order to play something back or understand it, you need to just listen and say nothing. And that takes practice.
Yeah, so true. You've got to train yourself to be comfortable with not the uncomfortable, but maybe the abnormal for you to just like not say anything. Like my mum is the best listener. And I have those situations where like, I work on my own, I have got a team, it's just me. And like sometimes you just need to kind of talk.
Definitely.
And I pick up the phone, I'm like, Mum, I'm going to rant, bear with. And she's like, okay. And I just go word vomit to her. And she is just great at being like, well, I think you just worked that out, haven't you? I was like, yeah. And like, she's not the expert. She's not going to come with the most amazing plan. Like I even say, what do you think? She goes, don't know. And I'm like, cool, great. Nice. Sometimes I'm like, won't come to you then for advice. But I'm not looking for her advice because she doesn't actually know, because she's not actually experienced it or doesn't know what to say. But she's just really good at listening and letting you just speak and work it out. And it's actually fine if you come out of that conversation not actually knowing or having an answer, but just having aired it, you've kind of got a bit close to yourself. Because the worst thing is when you listen, like you speak to someone and they're like this, and like overcrowd your mind with like different options, and you come away like, oh, I don't actually know now what I think, because they've given it all their opinion, which is great and it might help you balance your ideas and your thoughts, but sometimes it's not what you necessarily need. Like just listening and just being that soundboard.
I was going to say, can we please give Mum a shout out? Because yes, Mum, we need more people like that in our lives.
No.
But I love when you said, well, it sounds like she's genuinely responding like, I don't know. But whether she realised she's doing this or not is actually really helpful, because exactly as you said, it's building your self-trust. So you have to go and figure it out. And the fact is that she's like, I don't know. But she's also holding that space for you to be like, I know you're going to figure it out. And it's okay that it feels like maybe a bit uncomfortable now, or you've had an overwhelming day, but I'm here. You've had that space to vent, which I really do believe we all need. And exactly as you said, not having your mind crowded with, well, have you tried this? Or how about this? Because actually, I often say that we will figure out the answer And that will come down to how much we trust ourselves. But you can figure it out. Always one of my favorite quotes is, the power's already within you. You just might have forgotten that along the way.
So true.
Like, you do have it within you.
Yeah. And also another thing about listening is like a tip, actually just thinking about what my mum does, is check in like a few days later and be like, so have you figured it out? Or like, how's that decision? Or what are you going to do on that? Like, as a friend, if someone comes to you and like shares something, like a problem, whatever, and like you deal with it in the moment with them, and then you kind of forget about it and move on, I'm always like, oh my God, I wonder like how my friends got on with that. Or like, that's when you know you've truly listened, because you're still thinking about it. And that's when they know you truly listened, because they're like, oh my gosh, she remembers. And like, we all have our own things going on. We've all got our own lives. We're all busy. Yeah. But the fact that you've thought about that and asked them, oh, how's that going? They're like, oh wow, you really did care and you really did listen. I think that's really good as well, because it just reminds them like, oh, they did like listen to that, which I think is really good.
That is honestly such a gorgeous tool, and I'm so glad you said it, because I thought actually it's probably helpful we just touch on a couple bite-sized tools even in the moment, because I think people will often like listen to this or listen to when you're talking about how to be a better listener and like, okay, great, how do I be a better listener? And you are so right, check in. That's such a beautiful way, because it's acknowledgement.
And also what I love, and I've got a friend who we do this to each other, and you know when someone's like telling you a story and it's really rubbish and they had a really bad day and like they're just having a massive rant, and it's like, and a lot of people will be like, yeah, but on the positive side,
yes.
Sometimes I'm just like, my friend, you know what, that is really fucking shit. Yes. And you just need to be like, that is terrible. You know what? You've had a really, really shit day, and I'm sorry about that. But tomorrow's better. Like, you're not here to put a spin on it. Just agree and wallow in the rubbishness. Because sometimes you just need someone to be like, I hear you. That is really bad. Nothing I can say here that's going to make it better, but I agree. It's really crappy. Like, we're not here to put the fluff on it and dress it up and make it better. Like, sometimes you need the positive outlook. Yeah. And we're not going to wallow in it for days. Yes. But just sometimes do that one day, just to feel the feels, and then you can move on. But having that person to always be like, yeah, that was rubbish. Not always, well, you know what? If you look at it like this, it could actually be a positive thing. You're like, no. We're not here for the positive right now. We just want to let it be rubbish. And I think that's quite nice.
Honestly, that's more powerful than you even know, because it's creating that space to validate how that person feels. And exactly as you said, different if we're spending all day, every day wallowing, but we're not. And I think as well, especially when you're doing your own work, whether it's communication that you're working on, another area of your self-development, looking at your relationships, sometimes we really expect that because we're doing the work, life's going to be so positive. And I'm like, no, it's about giving you the tools so that when life takes a dip, you just know how to handle it.
This leads me really nicely onto boundaries, because I feel like this is a massive thing.
My hot topic.
Yeah, and I feel like I need to work on mine. Like, I feel like I'm not good at this.
That's okay.
So let's talk about what boundaries are and why we need them.
For sure. I think no matter what I'm working with my clients on, at some point boundaries comes into it. And I think we actually don't realise the depth of them and how it plays into every aspect of our life. The way we feel about ourselves, the relationships we have. So, definition. I always say boundaries are your signposts or your signals that you give to other people and to yourself about the way that you want to be treated. That's it. It's so simple. And it's a way that you identify, this is my need or my want, or this is something that's important to me. And I'm going to communicate that to you. And I'm going to say, hey, this is what I need or I want in order for me to be my best self or my best version. And I know there's such a misconception of, if I'm sharing or communicating what I need, I'm selfish. And that will come down to so much of our belief system of how we've grown up. And so for many of my clients, no matter how good they are, how confident they are at like work or in their career or certain aspects of their life, if we don't learn how to at least acknowledge what we need, you're going to find it so difficult to show up for other people. Or you'll do it, but you will get to a point in your life, and it can take years, where there will be something that creeps in. It could be resentment. It could be a lack of satisfaction. It could be hurt. Resentment usually as well comes from overgiving. So I usually give that as an example, because that's a big sign for me that you haven't checked in with what you need. So the other thing I want to say quickly before we kind of like delve into it is that there's different types of boundaries, and I don't think many of us know that. And so you might have some boundaries in your life which are really good. So you might at work be really strict about the hours that you work, and if your boss is going to ask you to work on an additional project, you'll be like, nope, sorry, I'm at capacity. I don't know how many people listen to this will be like, I'd say that. But I do have some people that are good with their work boundaries. So let's just go through the boundaries high level. You've got time boundaries. So this is usually, I have a lot of people that are in my community that are like high achievers, overwhelmed, overworked. Your time boundaries is how you use your time and how you let other people use your time. So a big one I say is where you saying yes, but really inside you meant no. Right?
I'm a yes person. I'm like, yep. Inside I'm like, I
can't do anymore. I can't fit any more into my day, right?
Yeah.
So time's a huge one. Your emotional boundaries. So again, when we talked about mum holding really great space for you as well, your emotional boundaries as well is somebody holding space for you. Also as well, emotional boundaries in friendships. I've had people say to me, my friend emotionally dumps on me, and I just can't hold space anymore for it, especially when it's on a regular basis. Really different if someone's going through something tough. So your emotional boundaries as well is like what you can take on and have capacity for, and also what you're sharing or oversharing with somebody else. And there's a really fine line with that one. Material boundaries, your things. So I had a friend who had lent like a really expensive piece of clothing a few times to one of their friends, and it kept coming back damaged, stained, ripped. And they basically wanted to say, hey, I don't want to lend you it anymore. But they were so petrified of coming across as mean that they were going to lose the friendship. And actually I was like, okay, but why does that upset you? And they said, well, it feels like they've not respected it. I said, okay. And they said they've returned it as well and not even said anything. So there's so many layers to that boundary. Like I have a boundary. Very rarely do I lend people money. I'm cool with my boundary on that.
I'd be the same.
I'm like really okay with that, right?
Yeah.
So material is your things, your car, your home. I heard one of my favorite therapists is Tasha Bailey. I heard her say this on a podcast, and I was like, oh, amazing, because this is my boundary too. I know I said it to you when I walked in as well, but when you walk in my house, you have to take your shoes off. And that's my boundary. Like,
this is really interesting because I have a feeling of like, my home, your home, if you're comfortable, like do whatever makes you comfortable. I don't want to tell you to take your shoes off if you're not comfortable.
oh no.
So that's my perception of it.
Beautiful.
How interesting, because like, I always say like,
Yeah.
time out, oh, I should actually probably make people take their shoes off because like the thought of outside coming inside, blah, blah, blah. But I've got hard floors here and sometimes I forget. So I'm like, I'm very much like my home, your home. And because it's in the kitchen, I'm like, I don't want to be like, yep, shoes off. Like, I'm like, what's your comfortable? But I should probably say, like, whatever you're comfortable doing, you do. But I don't. I'm just like, oh, no, it's fine.
Okay,
So I'm
beautiful.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I'm always like, oh, no, I don't want them to feel, if they want to keep their shoes on for whatever reason, I'm forcing them not to. I'm like, I know I want them to be so comfortable. So that's quite funny.
So my challenge to you, which you don't need to answer now, but I think would be really good, is for you to reflect on actually what's important to you. Because so far what I'm hearing, but it'll be good for you to reflect on it, is my house is your house. I want you to feel comfortable. So that feels like your boundary. Like you're totally okay with it, but I also want you to just go a bit deeper and say, is that my boundary? Like, am I truly okay with it? Or do I feel like I'm putting somebody out by asking? And then you'll figure out what that boundary is.
Yeah, interesting. So interesting. Yeah. God, I'm really, really bad actually at like thinking about what I want.
Yeah.
Like I had a friend say something to me recently and it was so true. She was like, you're so principled. Yeah. Like you do things because of what you know you should do and what you know people want you to do and what you know is the right thing to do. When do you ever just do what you want to do? And I was like, no, like I don't. Like apart from my career is what I want to do. And like, I love my job. And my flatmate said to me, what's your dream job? And I was like, I think I'm doing it. Like, beautiful. I literally love what I do so much. And that's because I've chosen to do that. But other than that, I'm like, I don't know. Like, I genuinely like make my decisions based on what I think is the right thing rather than what I want to do. So my boundaries are probably gone. I don't know if I have any. Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
And it might be that I'm not even gonna say gone, but maybe never even existed. And I hear that, and I want to kind of attribute it, and this is because was my life, but it's that good girl syndrome. So I always say, like, I went to uni because I should. Now, my uni was my best 3 years of my life. I absolutely had a ball, but there was no thought in my head ever about not going. So I did what I thought I was supposed to do and what I should do, and the expectations that were put on me or assumed or implied, right? So it's so beautiful to hear you play back and say, Amira, I'm not sure if I've got my boundaries. And hearing your friend play it back as well, it's actually like, okay, great. Because that's just opened up space for you to think about, well, how do I feel about my things?
My final question is, what would your last meal be? I need starter, main course, and dessert, and I just love this question so much.
This is the best question to end on. Okay, my last meal, starter. Oh, 100%. So I don't know how this didn't make my top 3 restaurant, but I love tapas.
Okay.
100%. So gambas pil, prawns in garlic and oil with freshly baked bread and loads of butter.
Yep.
That's my starter.
Nice.
My main, it would probably be oxtail, rice and peas, and festival. And plantain, 100% plantain. That would be my last, yeah.
Okay, I love that.
That would be my last meal.
And dessert?
Hands down, easiest one on the table, sticky toffee pudding. Like,
With ginger in it? No.
I actually don't, no, but with dates. With dates, yes.
Yeah.
Sticky toffee pudding. I don't like custard, controversial. Do I need ice cream? No. And a glass of sangria, please.
I love it. I like the
Red.
energy drink in it. I love it. Amira, thank you so much for coming on. This has been like, I feel like I've just had therapy. But it's been amazing. So thank you so much. I think communication is like, it's key, isn't it? I mean, we can't live without it. So this has been so insightful. Thank you so, so much.
You are an incredible host. Thank you for having me.